What is up, everybody? We're on day 127 of our Bible in a Year series. We're continuing in Second Chronicles today. In 2 Chronicles 16, to be specific, and we will jump straight in. In the 36th year of Asa, Israel's king, Baasha went to war against Judah. He built Ramah in order to keep anyone from leaving or coming to King Asa of Judah. So Asa brought out silver and gold from the treasuries of the Lord's temple and the royal palace and sent it to Aram's king Ben-Hadad, who lived in Damascus, saying, "There's a treaty between me and you, between my father and your father. Look, I have sent you silver and gold. Go break your treaty with Israel's king Baasha, so that he will withdraw from me." Ben-Hadad listened to King Asa and sent the commanders of his armies to the cities of Israel. They attacked Ijon, Dan, Abel-maim, and all the storage cities of Naphtali. When Baasha heard about it, he quit building Ramah and stopped his work. Then King Asa brought all Judah, and they carried away the stones of Ramah and the timbers Baasha had built it with. Then he built Geba and Mizpah with them. At that time, the seer Hanani came to King Asa of Judah and said to him, "Because you depended on the king of Aram and have not depended on the Lord your God, the army of King Aram has escaped from you. Were not the Cushites and Libyans a vast army with many chariots and horsemen? When you depended on the Lord, he handed them over to you. For the eyes of the Lord roam throughout the earth to show himself strong for those who are wholeheartedly devoted to him. You have been foolish in this matter, therefore you will have wars from now on." Asa was enraged with the seer and put him in prison because of his anger over this, and Asa mistreated some of the people at that time. Note that the events of Asa's reign, from beginning to end, are written in the book of the kings of Judah and Israel. In the 39th year of his reign, Asa developed a disease in his feet, and his disease became increasingly severe. Yet even in his disease he didn't seek the Lord, but only the physicians. Asa rested with his ancestors. He died in the 41st year of his reign. He was buried in his own tomb that he had made for himself in the city of David. They laid him out in a coffin that was full of spices and various mixtures of prepared ointments. Then they made a great fire in his honor. Chapter 17. I think you can show it's good there that he, or would have been good had he gone to God. And this is something that I think we miss about faith a lot. Like, it was brought up that he was rebuked for going to this other king and not going to God. And then part of the rebuke was, this has already happened. Like, I've already saved you from these people who had chariots and had all this other stuff. So it's showing that his faith in God was built at least partially on previous experience, or should have been. God was expecting that to be the case. Or God was saying, maybe not expecting is not the right word, God was saying that that should have been the case. And it wasn't. So I think that's kind of showing that faith here, what we talk about as faith in the Bible, is not just like a blind faith based on no evidence. That's a terrible mischaracterization of what faith is. Faith is belief based on experience. It doesn't have to be experience of your own. It could be experience of other people that you've seen. It could be things that we see in the Bible, if we trust the Bible is true. It could be things that we see in the Bible that we know is trustworthy. We can take for the character of God and know that he doesn't change. But yeah, that's a good point. Chapter 17. His son Jehoshaphat became king in his place and strengthened himself against Israel. He stationed troops in every fortified city of Judah and set garrisons in the land of Judah and in the cities of Ephraim that his father Asa had captured. Now the Lord was with Jehoshaphat because he walked in the former ways of his ancestor David. He did not seek the Baals, but sought the God of his father and walked by his commands, not according to the practices of Israel. So the Lord established the kingdom in his hand. Then all Judah brought him tribute, and he had riches and honor and abundance. He took great pride in the Lord's ways, and he again removed the high places and Asherah poles from Judah. In the 3rd year of his reign, Jehoshaphat sent his officials Ben-Hail, Obadiah, Zechariah, Nathaniel, and Micaiah to teach in the cities of Judah. The Levites with them were Shemaiah, Nathaniah, Zebediah, Ashiel, Shemiramoth, Jehonathan, Adonijah, Tobijah, and Toba Adonijah. The priest Elishama and Jehoram were with these Levites. They taught throughout Judah, having the book of the Lord's instruction with them. They went throughout the towns of Judah and taught the people. The terror of the Lord was on all kingdoms of the land that surround Judah, so they didn't fight against Jehoshaphat. Some of the Philistines also brought gifts of silver as tribute to Jehoshaphat, and the Arabs brought him flocks, 7,700 rams, and 7,700 male goats. Jehoshaphat grew stronger and stronger. He built fortresses and storage cities in Judah and carried out great works in the towns of Judah. He had fighting men, valiant warriors in Jerusalem. These are their numbers according to their ancestral families. From Judah, the commanders of thousands, Adnah, the commander of 300,000 valiant warriors with him. Next to him, Jehohanan, I don't know. We'll go with that. Jehohanan, the commander of 280,000 with him. Next to him, Amasiah, son of Zikri, the volunteer of the Lord, and 200,000 valiant warriors with him. From Benjamin, Eliada, a valiant warrior, and 200,000 with him, armed with bow and shield. Next to him, Jehozabad, and 180,000 with him, equipped for war. These were the ones who served the king, besides those he stationed in the fortified cities throughout all Judah. Chapter 18. Now Jehoshaphat had riches and honor and abundance, and he made an alliance with Ahab through marriage. Then after some years he went down to visit Ahab in Samaria. Ahab slaughtered many sheep, goats, and cattle for him and for the people who were with him, and he persuaded him to attack Ramoth-Gilead. For Israel's king Ahab asked Judah's king Jehoshaphat, "Will you go with me to Ramoth-Gilead?" He replied to him, "I am as you are, my people as your people. We will be with you in the battle." But Jehoshaphat said to the king of Israel, "First, please ask what the Lord's will is." So the king of Israel gathered the prophets, 400 men, and asked them, "Should we go to Ramoth-Gilead for war, or should I refrain?" They replied, "March up, and God will hand it over to the king." But Jehoshaphat asked, "Is there a prophet of the Lord here anymore?" This is, if you remember the story, I think it was in 2 Kings? I don't know, I get them mixed up. But what we're going to see here is that a true prophet steps up, and it's an interesting story. Verse 6, but Jehoshaphat asked, "Is there a prophet of the Lord here anymore? Let's ask him." The king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, "There is still one man who can inquire of the Lord, but I hate him, because he never prophesies good about me, but only disaster. He is Micaiah, son of Imlah. The king shouldn't say that, Jehoshaphat replied. So the king of Israel called an officer and said, "Hurry and get Micaiah, son of Imlah." I'm not sure how to say his name. Now the king of Israel and King Jehoshaphat of Judah, clothed in royal attire, were each sitting on his own throne. They were sitting on the threshing floor at the entrance to Samaria's gate, and all the prophets were prophesying in front of them. Then Zedekiah, son of Chenaanah, made iron horns and said, "This is what the Lord says: You will gore the Arameans with these until they are finished off." And all the prophets were prophesying the same, saying, "March up to Ramoth Gilead and succeed. The Lord will hand it over to the king." The messenger who went to call Micaiah instructed him, "Look, the words of the prophets are unanimously favorable for the king. So let your words be like theirs and speak favorably." But Micaiah said, "As the Lord lives, I will say whatever my God says." So he went to the king, and the king asked him, "Micaiah, should we go to Ramoth Gilead for war, or should I refrain?" Micaiah said, "March up and succeed, for they will be handed over to you." But the king said to him, "How many times must I make you swear not to tell me anything but the truth in the name of the Lord?" So Micaiah said, "I saw all Israel scattered on the hills, like sheep without a shepherd. And the Lord said, They have no master, let each return home in peace." So the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, "Didn't I tell you he never prophesies good about me, but only disaster?" Then Micaiah said, "Therefore, hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and the whole heavenly army was standing at his right hand and at his left hand. And the Lord said, Who will entice King Ahab of Israel to march up and fall at Ramoth Gilead?" So one was saying this, and another was saying that. Then a spirit came forward, stood before the Lord, and said, "I will entice him." And the Lord asked him, "How?" So he said, "I will go and become a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets." Then he said, "You will entice him and also prevail. Go and do that. Now you see, the Lord has put a lying spirit into the mouth of these prophets of yours, and the Lord has pronounced disaster against you." Then Zedekiah, son of Chenaanah, came up, hit Micaiah on the cheek, and demanded, "Which way did the Spirit of the Lord leave me to speak to you?" Micaiah replied, "You will soon see when you go to hide in an inner chamber on that day." Then the king of Israel ordered, "Take Micaiah and return him to Amon, the governor of the city, and to Joash the king's son, and say, 'This is what the king says: Put this guy in prison, and feed him only a little bread and water until I come back safely.'" But Micaiah said, "If you ever return safely, the Lord has not spoken through me." Then he said, "Listen, all you people." Then the king of Israel and Judah's king Jehoshaphat went up to Ramoth Gilead. But the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, "I will disguise myself and go into battle, but you wear your royal attire." So the king of Israel disguised himself, and they went into battle. Now the king of Aram had ordered his chariot commanders, "Do not fight with anyone at all except the king of Israel." When the chariot commanders saw Jehoshaphat, they shouted, "He must be the king of Israel." So they turned to attack him. But Jehoshaphat cried out, and the Lord helped him. God drew them away from him. When the chariot commanders saw that he was not the king of Israel, they turned back from pursuing him. But a man drew his bow without taking special aim and struck the king of Israel through the joints of his armor. So he said to the charioteer, "Turn around and take me out of the battle, for I am badly wounded." The battle raged throughout the day, and the king of Israel propped himself up in his chariot facing the Arameans until evening. Then he died at sunset. And that is it. That's a good place to leave it, right? I always thought this was an interesting story, and we see a lot in, excuse me, in, I feel like especially the Old Testament, we see a lot of almost, I don't think this is the belief, but it's almost it seems like Ahab was mad because he felt like the prophecies that were being given to him were Micaiah. Micaiah. Yeah. Um, he said it almost seemed like he felt like the prophet himself was deciding what to say. And you see, Micaiah says, no, I'm going to say what God tells me to say. So, I don't know. It's interesting because you do see, it does seem like there's a lot of people where that, and maybe it's just the language that's used, is they're holding the prophet accountable for the word that's given, even though they know it's coming from God. But interesting either way. And we have some questions to get to. Question 1. Asa's turn to Syria for help in chapter 16 provokes God's rebuke. How does his choice challenge us to examine where we place our trust in times of crisis? And what does it reveal about relying on God's strength alone? I kind of talked about this a little bit while we were reading it. But God does not, and we see this time and time and time and time again. In Scripture, you look at the story of Gideon, right? Excuse me. The story of Gideon, you see where the soldiers come, but it's too many. And so God tests and says, if they do this, then go home. Okay, well then there's another test. They do this, go home. And knocks out down to 300 men. And the reason was so no one would think that anybody but God gave them that victory. So God wants the odds to be completely against the people that he is going to work through, so that it is clear it is God doing it, not those people. And I think we see another example of that here, where God wanted Asa to rely on him, and he didn't. God wanted to work through him so that people around and the nations around would see, hey, God is still here. He is still working. He is still doing this. And that's not what Asa did. So he relied on others, and that's what ended up happening. Question 2. Jehoshaphat's reforms in chapter 17 strengthens Judah's devotion. How might his efforts inspire us to consider the role of intentional spiritual leadership in fostering a community's faithfulness to God's covenant? I think this is a big deal. Talking about spiritual leadership, for good or for bad, a body of believers, I think, will generally follow wherever the leadership they have is going. I think part of it is people just generally don't like change. They don't want to shake things up at the top. They don't like confrontation, things like that. But for good or for worse, they follow leadership. So that means if you have good leadership, you'll have good following, or good thing to follow, and you'll follow into good things. And if you have bad leadership, you will follow into bad things. Generally speaking, not always. But I think with that, that's why we see leaders are held to a much higher standard. If you have a leader, and this is not just in a church. I think you can see this in a family. You can see this in a lot of different, really anywhere that you have a spiritual leader, I guess you could say. But however the spiritual leader is going about things, that is going to set the pace and set the course for everyone that is under his leadership. So it could be a church, that could be a father in a household. But it's important, because that is what is going to, now ultimately everyone makes their own decision, but that is going to be a big part in setting the stage for individuals to interact with God, to start building their own relationship with God. Question 3. Micaiah's bold prophecy in chapter 18, despite pressure to confirm, leads to Ahab's downfall. How does this courage prompt us to reflect on the cost and necessity of standing for God's truth in a world that often resists it? This is something that we maybe don't see as much in the West. I do think that at least we had kind of started going down a path. Even then, though, it was very minuscule compared to what we see in other parts of the world. But think about not even that long ago, there was a guy who was, I think he was a street preacher in the UK, and he was, killed while he was out doing it. And it was, if I'm remembering correctly, I believe it was by Muslims, and they were celebrating it. They were celebrating that he died at their hand. That wouldn't have happened if he had just gone along with what they were wanting, what they were saying. That happened because he was standing firm against what they believed. I saw a story, I think it was in San Francisco, I may be wrong. I know it was in California somewhere. There's a street preacher again, and there was a man who identified as not a man walked up and put a gun to his head. Right? And I don't think anything ever ended up happening. I don't think he was actually shot or anything like that. But I've seen some video, and he doesn't back down. Like, it doesn't show that actually happening. Or it's the instance, but you don't see the actual act. It came from some witnesses, I believe. But you do see, like, you get the idea of what's going on. And he stands firm on it. That is a difficult thing to do. Maybe I'm strange for this, but that's something that I've thought about. Like, I hope I'm never in that situation, or a situation like that, or even a more serious situation. But if I am, would I be able to place Christ above everything? And I don't think you can truly know unless you're in the situation. I hope I would. I hope I'd be able to. But that would be difficult to do. But maybe that's something to kind of reflect on. Think about, how serious do you take your beliefs? Because if it's something that you just passively do, if it takes any real sacrifice, you're going to drop it. If you're not willing to sacrifice some time now, you're not going to sacrifice anything more when it comes to that moment. I think it's a good gut check. And I think everybody can do more, and everybody can do better. I'm not trying to say anything about anybody else, single anybody else out. I am speaking as much to me in this as I am anybody else. So that is it for today. Sombering note to end on, but appreciate everyone watching and listening up to this point. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. I enjoy interacting with people as much as I can. If this has been a blessing to you, share it with other people. Word of mouth is the best way that podcasts spread, so you can share it with others, and it can be a blessing to them as well. Tomorrow we'll be continuing on in 2 Chronicles with more interesting stuff. We get to see the conclusion of what happened with the prophet who was not scared to stand up for what he knew God had said. And we'll get to the end of that story. So, thanks. God bless.